What's going on, everybody? My name is Johnny Bannon, the networking guru, and in today's video, we're going to be covering 70 Security Plus questions for Domain 2. This is the brand new Security Plus exam, SY0-701, that we're going to be covering. Make sure you like, subscribe, share this content with your friends. Now, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's get my face out of here. And in today's video, we're going to be using our custom learning management system from trepatech.com that has these 70 Domain 2 questions. If you're interested in purchasing this software, check the link in the description below. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I'm going to come to my exams here. I'm going to search Domain 2. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, let me zoom in here so we can see it clear on the screen. Not that much. Maybe right there is good. And we're going to jump right into it. So question 1. A security analyst discovers that an organization's web server is configured to use outdated cryptographic ciphers, making it vulnerable to attacks that can decrypt encrypted communications. What type of vulnerability does this scenario illustrate? It's just outdated cryptographic ciphers, so cryptographic misconfiguration is what we're going to go with here. So essentially what we're saying here, it's using weak ciphers is really what this question is trying to, the point it's trying to get across is that it's using a weak cipher. So we consider that cryptographic misconfiguration. And when those settings are used, it could fall victim to attacks, okay? Question 2. Which of the following best describes an external threat actor with extensive resources, advanced techniques, and a high level of sophistication? So this would be, I would call this an advanced persistent threat, but in the Security Plus SY0-701 exam, they call this a nation-state threat, which APTs are usually sponsored by nation-states, so I'm not going to say it's completely incorrect, but that's what the Security Plus exam says, nation-states. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 3. A user receives a phone call from someone claiming to be a representative from their bank. The caller insists that there has been suspicious activity on the account and requests the user's account number and security PIN for verification. What type of attack vector is being used? So it's a phone call. This is a social engineering attack over a VoIP phone. So this is going to be vishing, voice call phishing. Now on the exam, they won't call it voice call phishing. It'll just be vishing. But I kind of like this answer. It explains that, hey, this is a phishing attempt, but instead of using email, we're using a phone. So vishing. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 4. An attacker generates two different files that produce the same cryptographic hash value, allowing them to forge a digital signature. What type of cryptographic attack does this scenario describe? So essentially what's happened here is that, when we take a hash of two separate values, we should create a unique hash for both. If you get the same hash from two different original inputs, that's called a collision. So a collision just happened. So we're going to go with a collision attack. And older hashes are vulnerable to this, like MD5. So upgraded ones like SHA, 256, 384, 512 is what we prefer. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 5. A user receives an email that appears to be from their company's IT department, instructing them to reset their password through a provided link. The link directs them to a fake login page that captures their credentials. What type of attack vector is being used? So this would be like a credential harvesting attack, but it's asking what the attack vector is. It's email. It says it right there. Email is the way they're trying to that's the vector. That's how they're getting to the victim. It's through email. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 6. An attacker is able to intercept network traffic between a public Wi-Fi hotspot and connected users, capturing sensitive data such as login credentials. Which security risks does this scenario best illustrate? So they're capturing something over a wireless network. So this is unsecure wireless network. So this is a public Wi-Fi that users are not using a VPN or whatever the case may be. They're able to capture sensitive data from those users because it's a public access point that probably doesn't do WPA2, WPA3. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 7. An attacker exploits a vulnerability in an application by sending more data to a memory buffer than it can handle, causing the program to overwrite adjacent memory locations. This can lead to crashes or arbitrary code execution. What type of vulnerability is this? So they're exploiting RAM, the memory, and they're saying that they're sending more data than a memory buffer, like a section of that memory can handle. So we're going to go with buffer overflow here. And let's see what it says. Yep, that is buffer overflow. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 8. A data center experiences overheating due to a malfunctioning cooling system, leading to system shutdowns and potential hardware damage. This incident is classified as which type of security threat? So this is dealing with the environment. This is dealing with something that it's not necessarily an attack, or it's not necessarily someone coming in and, destroying the HVAC. This is, well, I guess that could happen. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that this is environmental, right? There's not something technical that is happening. This is in the environment. So we're going to go with C, an environmental attack. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 9. An attacker sends a specially crafted HTTP request to a web server that includes a URL path containing sequences like this, ///Etsy password, trying to get access to the username file in the Etsy directory of a web server, Linux, allowing them to access restricted system files. What type of attack does this describe? This is called directory traversal. So sending an HTTP request, trying to get to files that are not, that shouldn't be being exposed to the internet, because it's a web server, right? So these files live in Linux web servers. It's a directory traversal attack. Question 10. An attacker exploits a vulnerability in a hypervisor, allowing them to break out of a guest virtual machine and execute commands on the host system. This could allow them to compromise other VMs running on the same host. What type of vulnerability does this describe? So that's virtual machine escape, right? It's kind of, these other answers don't really make sense. It's someone getting out of the virtual machine and getting access to that hypervisor. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 11. A developer writes an application that checks a file's access permissions before opening it. However, an attacker quickly replaces the file with a malicious one between the time the check is performed and the time the file is accessed. What type of vulnerability is being exploited? So it's dealing with timing, and essentially going through iteratively, right, sequentially. It's messing up the sequence. We're going to go with C here. Time of check, time of use. To read the explanation, TOC/TOU race conditions occur when an application checks a resource at one point in time but uses it at a later time, allowing an attacker to alter the resource between these two operations. So that's called a race condition, but it's also like, on the exam objectives, they call it a time of check, time of use attack. Question 12. A security analyst discovers that a malicious program is running on a workstation, capturing keystrokes and sending the collected data to an external server. The infected user has reported an unusual account activity and unauthorized transactions. What type of malware is responsible for this attack? So it's capturing keystrokes. That's the key thing here. So it's going to be a keylogger. And typically keyloggers do come with some sort of data exfiltration with it, which is this right here, sending the collected data to an external server, which could be like a command and control server, really just a malicious actor. Pause the video if you'd like to read the explanation. Question 13. A security analyst notices that users are being redirected to a fake login page when trying to access the company's website. Upon investigation, they find that an attacker has manipulated DNS records to resolve domain requests to a malicious server. What type of attack is this? So I think this accurately describes DNS poisoning, where we're like changing the A records in there to do bad, resolutions to our DNS requests, saying, hey, that URL, that domain name actually belongs to this IP, and it's some blacklisted IP in Russia or China. That's going to be DNS poisoning. Question 14. A security administrator discovers that an attacker has exploited a vulnerability to hypervisor, allowing them to break out of a guest virtual machine and execute commands on the host system. I think it's like a little repeat one. I'll make sure to jot that down. Question 15. An attacker gains access to a low-privileged user account and exploits a vulnerability to execute commands with administrative privileges. Which type of attack has occurred? So privilege escalation, kind of in the name, in the question there, they used just a user account, and they exploited a vulnerability which allows them to get higher permissions. So that's a privilege escalation attack. Question 16. Which of the following best describes a key security challenge when using client-based security software compared to agentless security solutions? So client-based security software, that's where it actually gets installed in the OS, and it uses that, or the host system, whatever, your laptop, your desktop. And it actually uses that desktop's resources, or that laptop's resources, to include storage and compute. It could really slow down your system. So a key security challenge, though, is, availability is security. So if it slows something down, that is something that as cybersecurity professionals, we have to think about, how our users function in our enterprise. Are we being a hindrance to them? That does, something we should think about. But with agentless software, that's more just reaching out on the network, right? Reaching out from a central server, kind of connecting to these endpoints, these hosts we're scanning or we're monitoring and managing. And it's not actually using that endpoint's compute resources. So I'm going to go with B. Client-based solutions require software to be installed on each endpoint. All right, there we go. We're correct. Question 17. A security team discovers that an embedded system in a critical infrastructure device is vulnerable to remote exploits due to outdated software that cannot be updated. The device manufacturer no longer provides updates, but replacing the hardware is not immediately feasible. What type of vulnerability is this? It's end of life. So that device, whatever it is, let me see this. Okay, let's break this down. This is saying that it's firmware vulnerabilities. I guess, okay. Yeah, this is saying exactly what the... Okay, let's reread this. Security team discovers that an embedded system in a critical infrastructure device is vulnerable to remote exploits due to outdated software that cannot be patched. So the manufacturer no longer provides updates. So that is like an end-of-life, end-of-sale problem. It's really end of life because you could be EOS and they won't sell you the hardware, but they still may provide like updates for the next 2 years. They may just, take it off the shelf, the vendor. But an embedded system in the actual embedded system is what we're worried about, and that has the exploit that can't be patched. So what type of vulnerability is this? I can see where we're getting B from. Firmware vulnerabilities. Let's see what the explanations say. Yeah, this one is kind of... I don't know if I completely agree with it. I think it is an end of life because we can't... Well, the problem is that it's end of life, but the actual vulnerability could be in the firmware, but it doesn't really say that. It just says embedded system. Embedded systems could have real-time operating systems on it, so it's not clear that it's firmware. I think I'm going to go readjust this after this video. That's a great thing about recording, though. I can edit, but I think I'll leave this in here. I think I would actually go with C here. But is end of life really a vulnerability? I wouldn't consider it an actual vulnerability. This one's tough. I think B and C are both good answers. I don't know what CompTIA actually would think about this question. Let me pause the video. I just went and confirmed with our AI overlords, did some additional research, and I think this is wrong. It is C. This is end-of-life vulnerability because you don't know if it's actually firmware, right? Let's redo this real quick. Okay, it won't let me make the change. That's okay. But that one I would say is C. Okay, guys, let's move on. I'm going to have a missed question now at the end of all of these. That's okay. Question 18. A security team implements a policy requiring all company devices to have endpoint protection software installed, host-based firewalls enabled, and unnecessary services disabled. What security practice this policy enforce? So we're not talking about what are we actually installing, what kind of software is this we should implement, EDR, XDR, DLP, whatever. This is saying what kind of best practice is this? This is hardening. We're hardening our endpoints by implementing all these things. Question 19. A security engineer segments an enterprise network into different zones, such as public, internal, and sensitive data zones, to reduce the attack surface and limit lateral movement in case of a breach. What is the primary security benefit of this approach? So it's isolating the systems, right? We have this granularity now in our actual networks that we say, hey, if we get a worm on this little network segment, well, potentially our sensitive network segments they're not vulnerable to that. So maybe we have policy assigned to those network zones. Or, things that, a firewall, whatever, things that are filtering between those zones. Question 20. A hacker calls an employee pretending to be from the IT department. The hacker claims there is an urgent issue with the employee's account and asks for their login credentials to verify access. Which type of social engineering attack is occurring? So again, it's over the phone, right? Yeah, calls. I wouldn't say brand impersonation. We're going to go with vishing here. Because it's over the phone, voice. Question 21. An attacker registers a website domain similar to a legitimate online banking site but with a minor misspelling. Look at that. A little misspelling there. The attacker then uses the site to steal user login credentials. Which type of attack is best described? This one best describes typo squatting, where you just register a domain name that's very similar, and then, you're hoping that users make a mistake and go to your malicious one here. Question 22. A network administrator configures a firewall to allow only HTTP and HTTPS traffic to a public web server while blocking older types of connections. What security mechanism is being used in this scenario? Security mechanism? So in firewall, that's access control list. Let's see. Yep. So access control lists have access control entries that permit or deny and filter layer 3, layer 4 traffic on a traditional firewall. Question 23. An attacker exploits an undiscovered vulnerability in a mobile operating system, allowing them to remotely execute code before a security patch is available. What type of vulnerability is being exploited? So it's 0 day, right? There's no patch for something. It's a 0 day attack because there's no fix. Question 24. An attacker attempts to compromise multiple user accounts by trying a small set of commonly used passwords across many different accounts, avoiding account lockout. So, they're going through users trying all these passwords, okay? What type of attack is this? So it's not brute force, because I think brute force is like one user and trying thousands of passwords against that one user. It's not a birthday attack. This is a password spraying attack. This is saying, hey, we have all this list of users, and we're going to spray this password against all these different users, and hopefully one hits, like a common password. So we're going to go with C. Password spraying attack. Question 25. Which of the following best describes an employee who circumvents IT policies by using unauthorized cloud services or personal devices to perform work, potentially exposing sensitive data? That's going to be shadow IT. So that's going to be you taking IT into your own hands. Not necessarily malicious. Question 26. A user receives an MMS message containing an image that, when viewed, executes a hidden exploit in the image processing library, allowing the attacker to gain remote access to the device. What type of attack is this? They're trying to fool us here. So the attack vector is a message, you receiving a message. But there's an exploit hidden in an image that you may download. So the actual attack that's happening is image-based attack, and they're using this vector SMS to deliver it. But they're saying what type of attack is that? That's an image-based attack in this very specific scenario. Question 27. I mean, it was kind of both, right? But I think it's trying to get you like, oh, that would be a vector. That's how they accomplish the social engineering. All right, moving on. Question 27. An employee is fired from a company and later uses their retained access credentials to delete critical business data and disrupt operations. What is the most likely motivation behind this attack? Revenge, right? If that employee was fired and now they want to, hack your networks, bring things down, it's just revenge-based attack. Question 28. And we stop that by doing audits, right? Account audits and doing proper offboarding. Question 28. A security analyst discovers that a web application allows users to input data in a form field without proper validation. An attacker inputs a specially crafted SQL statement that retrieves all user account details from the database. What type of attack is this? So that's a SQL injection attack. But to prevent this would be something called input validation or parameterized queries. That's how we would prevent this attack. Question 29. A security administrator notices that a single user account has multiple login attempts for different geographic locations within a short period of time. One from the United States, another from Europe within minutes. What type of security indicator does this represent? Impossible travel. It's not possible for our user to be logging in at, the same time from even a mile distance, right? So impossible travel. That's having that good contextual awareness too, and like our policy enforcement points, and whoever's making the decision to authenticate, that's good contextual awareness. Question 30. A security analyst observes that an attacker is forcing a web server to use an older, weaker version of TLS, making it vulnerable to known exploits. What type of attack is this? It's a downgrade attack. Forcing the TLS to an older version to then exploit. That is called a downgrade attack. Question 31. An organization enforces a security policy where only pre-approved software applications can be installed and executed on company systems, preventing unauthorized or malicious software from running. Which security control is being applied? Pre-approved? So that's going to be an application allow list, sometimes called a whitelist, that pretty much has an implicit deny, and then you have to get it, it's individual software applications approved, added to that list to then be able to be installed on the network. So that's an application allow list. Question 32. A cybersecurity team deploys a security solution that continuously analyzes system and network activity to detect suspicious behavior, unauthorized access attempts, and potential data exfiltration. Which mitigation technique is being used? Continuously analyzes systems. It's monitoring, right? It says it right there, to detect suspicious. That's a monitoring. We're doing monitoring in this scenario. That could be with an IDS, firewall, EDR, XDR. Question 33. A software provider unknowingly distributes a malicious update that contains a hidden backdoor, allowing attackers to gain remote access to client systems. This compromise affects thousands of organizations. What type of attack does this represent? So since it's a provider, it's someone supplying software or supplying hardware. Well, in this case, just software. But if someone was supplying that and there's something malicious in there that they didn't know about, that means our supply chain is vulnerable. That we're going to integrate this software, this third-party software into our networks, and we didn't know that there was an exploit in there. That's a supply chain attack. Question 34. An IT department reports that a critical business application unexpectedly deletes files on the first day of each quarter. Upon investigation, they find malicious code embedded in the application that triggers based on this schedule. So there's a logic bomb. What type of malware is responsible with logic bomb? It's pretty much if-then statement. If you meet this criteria, then launch this malicious script or malicious software. In this case, deleting files. So that is a logic bomb. Question 35. A user purchases a new laptop and notices that it comes pre-installed with multiple trial software applications that they did not request. These programs consume system resources and slow down performance, but are not inherently malicious. What type of software is this described? This is bloatware. This is, it's add-ons. It's additional plugins that maybe we weren't exactly aware of, but now they're on your system and it's going to slow it down because it's using excess compute. Question 36. A company unknowingly installs a software update that has been tampered with by an attacker. The update includes a backdoor that grants unauthorized access to the system. What type of vulnerability does this represent? It's a malicious update, right? So we updated something, and now that update's been tampered with, and we have some sort of malware on our system. Question 37. A manufacturing company uses hardware components from a supplier that was unknowingly compromised by an APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. The infected components include backdoors that allow remote access to the company's internal network once deployed. What type of attack vector does this represent? So that's a supply chain attack. Remember, it's kind of asking like the same question before. We're getting something from a company, integrating to our network, and we didn't know there was an exploit. That's a supply chain attack. Question 38. A security administrator discovers that a critical business system is running on outdated hardware that is no longer supported by the manufacturer. This system cannot receive updates, making it highly vulnerable to attacks. What type of vulnerability is this scenario described? That's end-of-life vulnerability. That one's pretty cut and clear. It's EOL. Question 39. A penetration tester discovers that a web application allows users to submit SQL commands in input fields, enabling unauthorized access to databases. Which type of attack is occurring? So this is an injection attack, more specifically a SQL injection, but here our answer is just injection, so that's C, injection attack. We have LDAP injection, other XML injection. It's another another injection attack. Question 40. An attacker scans an organization's network and discovers that an outdated database server is listening on port 3306 with no firewall restrictions. This can allow an attacker to exploit vulnerabilities in the database. What type of threat vector does this scenario represent? So there's a port that it's listening to on 3306. So if we were to make a connection on that port, it would be wide open for us. So that's going to be C, open service ports. Question 41. Which characteristic distinguishes an internal threat actor from an external one? So that's just, are you on the inside? Do you know? So internal threat actor, it's just access to our systems. Doesn't mean they could be more, less sophisticated. It really just depends on, their access. Question 42. An attacker is able to gain access to a secure facility by copying the data from an employee's access badge and writing it to a blank RFID card. This allows them to enter restricted areas without detection. What type of attack does this represent? That's a RFID cloning. We're just literally cloning that radio frequency identifier onto our card. You can do this with like a flipper as well. If you don't know what that is, look it up. Pretty cool. Question 43. Which of the following motivations is most commonly associated with a nation-state actor conducting a cyber attack against a foreign government's defense systems? That's it. Ethical hacking. No, the best answer here is going to be espionage, right? We're just trying to ruin, our adversaries, attack our adversaries. Question 44. An employee plugs in an unknown USB drive found in a parking lot, unknowingly launching a malicious script that installs keylogging software on their workstations. Which type of attack vector does this scenario best describe? That's a removable device. So that's what a USB is. It's a removable device. It's part of like social engineering, kind of, because it's like, oh, it's in your company's parking lot, so it's probably somebody's USB, so it's probably not malicious. Kind of like, almost like pretexting, like, well, it's in a safe area, so it should be safe. But that's a removable device. So it's a removable device attack. That's the most accurate answer here. Question 45. An organization continues to use network routers and industrial control systems that are no longer supported by the manufacturer. These devices contain unpatched security vulnerabilities, making them susceptible to attacks. What type of risk does represent? That's legacy hardware. So legacy systems. The way we protect against this is either upgrade. If we can't upgrade, implement compensating controls like host-based firewalls, segmenting networks, hardening techniques. Question 46. A cloud provider dynamically allocates virtual machines to different customers. A security researcher discovers that residual data from a previous used VM instance is still accessible after the instance is reassigned to a new customer. What type of security risk does this represent? This is describing resource reuse. So just not doing proper your data lifecycle, getting rid of data remnants, and because you're reusing a resource. So that's going to be A. Question 47. A company deploys network printers and IoT devices using their factory set login credentials. That's a no-no. Shortly after, attackers exploit these devices to gain unauthorized access to the internal network. What is the primary vulnerability in this scenario? It's just leaving at default credentials. We protect this by doing hardening, segmenting the network, just the basic things. We're buying off-the-shelf stuff to bring into our network and our enterprise. Question 48. A company's security team discovers that a piece of malware has been secretly embedded in their software updates. The malware remains dormant but is programmed to execute destructive actions if a specific condition is met, such as a certain date or user action. What type of malware does this describe? So again, that's a logic bomb. A Trojan is just a disguise. Rootkit is getting to the kernel of the system, and virus is just kind of an overall umbrella term for malware. This describes a logic bomb because of the timing of it, right? It's logic. Only execute if this condition happens. Question 49. During a routine audit, a security team discovers that certain system logs are missing or incomplete, making it difficult to trace recent security events. What type of malicious activity indicator does this indicate? So, missing logs. So, missing logs, right? That's just pretty much saying someone's tampered with this. So if we see that logs have been tampered with, or it doesn't make sense, the sequence is off, we can assume maybe someone has some privileges that they shouldn't, and they're trying to hide something. And this could be an admin that messed up and wants to hide their tracks, or it could be something malicious as well. Question 50. A cyber criminal group operates a ransomware as a service business, providing malware to less skilled attackers in exchange for a share of their ransom payments. What does this scenario best describe? Sounds like organized crime, right? I wouldn't say high sophistication. Yeah, it's unskilled attackers with high resources and low sophistication. Okay. Let's see the explanation here. I don't know. It's cyber criminal groups. I mean, ransomware as a service, I feel, is pretty sophisticated. But the actual scenario is I think C or D could both work. Let's read the explanation. This scenario describes an organized crime group that monetizes cyber attacks or ransomware. They're not as... Okay. No, I think correct. I think that's probably a better answer. Moderate sophistication, right? Because they're not, in CompTIA's terms, highly sophisticated because they're not from nation states. They're not advanced persistent threats. So if I look at the first sentence here, that's what it's asking us to describe, not the end point, right? Which is what they're trying to get to, unskilled attackers. But I don't know. I think kind of a tricky question here. That's okay. I guess I can't always be 100, right? Maybe I'll edit this. Question 51. A hacker group launches a distributed denial of service attack against a financial institution to protest unethical business practices. Which of the following best describes their motivation? So it's a protest. So it's their philosophy. It's their morals, right? This would be called a hacktivist. Question 52. An attacker captures encrypted authentication traffic between a client and a server, then replays the captured credentials to gain unauthorized access to the network. What type of attack is this? Credential replay. Literally, it's in there, right? They're stealing credentials and then replaying them, hoping to initiate that session or to get an authenticated session. Question 53. A company discovers that attackers gain unauthorized access to a network device because they were still using the manufacturer's default password. What hardening technique would have prevented this? This one's easy, just changing the default credentials, and in this case, the default password. So you can't easily look up a product and then on their forums, like, oh yeah, this is the default password. We don't want that in our network. Question 54. A security analyst detects a program running on multiple endpoints that records users' keystrokes and sends the captured data to an external server. Which type of malware is being used? That again is going to be keylogger because it's capturing the keystrokes, capturing data, and sending it off. So that is a keylogger. Spyware is just, that would have been another answer that could be a little confusing. Oh, it's like spying on you, but doesn't specifically log keystrokes. A worm is malware that was self-propagating. Then a logic bomb, we've been over that a few times. That's not described here. Logic bomb is malware that meets a condition and then launches. Question 55. An organization's web server becomes unreachable after an attacker floods it with massive amounts of traffic by exploiting publicly accessible DNS resolvers to amplify the attack. Which type of network attack is occurring? Just as like a subset of DDoS attacks, kind of getting more specifically into the type of DDoS attacks. So we're using public resources to amplify our DDoS attack. So what do you think this is called? Amplified DDoS attack. Question 56. Which of the following threat actors is most likely to have substantial resources, including advanced technical capabilities and long-term strategic objectives, often targeting government entities or critical infrastructure? That's a nation state or an advanced persistent threat. Highly sophisticated, lots of time, lots of resources. Question 57. An organization experiences a cyber attack in which files across multiple systems are encrypted, and a message appears demanding payment in cryptocurrency to restore access. What type of malware attack has likely occurred? That's ransomware. That's a malware where it takes control of your system or denies you access to your files by doing an encryption. Then a little pop-up comes up that says, pay us 0.01 Bitcoin, and you pay it, and guess what? You're still encrypted, and they ask for 0.02 Bitcoin. To protect against this, like if it happens, make sure you have default backups. Make sure you have good restore points that don't have the malware on there. And of course, in our basic defense in depth, antivirus, don't click on phishing links. Question 58. A penetration tester discovers that a company's website does not sanitize user input in the command section, allowing an attacker to insert a script that executes in the visitor's browser. When users view the comment, their cookies are stolen and sent to the attacker's server. What type of vulnerability is being exploited? That's cross-site scripting. So the first time it's not an injection attack on this test, that's cross-site scripting. To prevent this, guys, input validation. Input validation is a way to prevent this. Question 59. An attacker compromises an MSP's remote management tool. Ooh, now they got access to so many companies, allowing them to deploy ransomware to multiple clients simultaneously. What makes this type of attack particularly dangerous is, MSPs have direct access to multiple customer networks. So it's a breach on the MSP that leads to breaches to multiple different companies. So we're going to go with A. MSPs have direct access to multiple customer networks. Question 60. An individual with low technical skill follows online tutorials to launch a simple ransom attack against a small business. What type of threat actor does this represent? That's an unskilled attacker. And this is one that's very unique. I like this because a lot of times small businesses, it's sad they don't have the money or they don't prioritize cybersecurity. And this can happen. Their WordPress site gets exploited and then, it messes up their whole business, their whole livelihood. Sometimes, we used to call it a script kiddie. Now the test says unskilled attacker. They're trying to make cybersecurity more professional. It's not a script kiddie. It's an unskilled attacker. Question 61. A system administrator is retiring outdated servers and ensuring that all sensitive data is securely wiped before disposal. The administrator also removes the devices from network inventories and revokes associated access permissions. What security process is being followed? An actual good decommissioning process that's looking at all the second order effects besides just throwing, taking the hard drive out and throwing it away, taking it off our asset inventories and stuff like that. It's good. That's a good network or system administrator. So that is B, decommissioning. Part of the data lifecycle. Question 62. A security administrator ensures that all company databases store sensitive customer data in a format that renders it unreadable without a decryption key. This practice primarily mitigates which security risk? Unreadable. without decryption key. I'm going to go with data exposure, right? We don't want those databases getting exploited and then getting exposed. So I'm going to go with A, data exposure. Question 63. An administrator enforces strict user permissions so that employees only have access to specific files and systems required for their job roles. What security principle is being applied? That's least privilege, which also what's described here is also role-based access control, which is something you implement to follow the principle of least privilege. Only giving users the exact permissions they need so we don't have privilege creep and we don't have, potential insider threats. Question 64. A cybersecurity analyst detects that a server is experiencing unusually high CPU and memory usage, slowing down critical applications. Upon investigation, they find unauthorized crypto mining software running on the system. Which security indicator does this scenario best describe? So how do we find it? What's our indicator? Is high resource consumption. This compute resource is what we're talking about in this scenario. That shouldn't be happening, right? Maybe we have designed our images, our operating systems, our desktops, our users' laptops to say, hey, even if they have 10 Chrome tab opens, we kind of have accounted for this, and we're seeing high spikes at 2 a.m. Why do we have this high resource consumption? So we investigate it, and it's crypto mining software. Question 65. A cloud service provider assigns computing resources dynamically to multiple customers. A researcher remnants, we kind of already did this one, but it's okay. Researcher discovers that remnants of one customer's data are still accessible to another customer due to improper resource deallocation. What type of vulnerability does this scenario illustrate? Or actually, is this resource reuse? Let's see. Yeah, it's a resource reuse vulnerability. C is kind of tricky. It's cloud-based misconfiguration, but that kind of almost implies that we did something. We misconfigured our cloud instance. This is saying the CSP did something wrong. So that's why I'm leaning towards D, resource reuse vulnerability. Question 66. A user downloads an application from an unofficial third-party app store and installs it on their smartphone. The application appears legitimate, but secretly contains malware that steals personal data. What type of security risk does this represent? Don't think it's C. Don't think it's D. It's going to be jailbreaking or sideloading. Unofficial third-party app store. Jailbreaking, let's just see. It's either A or B. I think it's going to be B here. Because sideloading is when an application is installed and it's kind of in the name. It's I got this from a non-compliant store, not the official app store. Jailbreak is when you pretty much unlock your entire phone, right? That's not what's being described here. It's just saying, hey, unauthorized application being installed. We prevent this by implementing MDM, mobile device management, if this is a corporate-owned phone especially, and then doing whitelisting, sandboxing. Question 67. A hospital continues to use outdated Windows XP machines for critical medical equipment. These systems can no longer receive security patches from the vendor, making them highly vulnerable to exploitation. What type of security risk does this scenario illustrate? So B, unsupported systems and applications. Again, it's just an end-of-life system. How do we protect? If we have to use end-of-life, how do we protect against it? Again, it's going to be with compensating controls. Isolating that machine. Putting as much hardening techniques as we can on it. Question 68. A company's employees receive an email that appears to be from the CEO, instructing them to urgently transfer funds to a new corporate account to finalize a business deal. This email address closely resembles the CEO's, but is actually from an attacker. What type of attack does this represent? What type of attack is this? This is going to be business email compromise, actually. Maybe you could think this was whaling, but it's business email compromise because of that key one here. It resembles the CEO's email address. So that means maybe someone actually created a legit email on our domain, and now we're compromised there. Question 69. A security analyst detects multiple failed login attempts from a single IP address, followed by a successful authentication using an administrative account. The login attempts appear to be systematically trying different password combinations. What type of attack is this? That's a brute force attack. We're trying the same password, or trying different passwords over and over and over again on a single account. How do we protect against this? Account lockouts, good auditing of our accounts, and multi-factor authentication. Question 70, last question. A large corporation suffers a data breach after attackers compromise a third-party payroll service provider, gaining access to sensitive employee information. Which supply chain vulnerability does this represent? It's our vendor. Our vendor got compromised. It's not default credentials. It's not a network that's unsecure. And it wasn't an insider threat. Well, maybe it was at the payroll provider, but we don't know that. That's a vendor compromise to us. Alrighty. Thank you guys for viewing this video. If you want access to these practice questions and our whole practice exam dumps, it's over 1,000 questions, click that link in the description below. If you're interested in live virtual training for Security Plus, check out the link in the description below. Thank you for viewing. I'll see you next time we go over Domain 3.